Sharon stood frozen in the doorway, her knuckles white around the coffee mug, eyes darting from my face to the flash drive in my hand. "You were never supposed to know," she repeated softly. I couldn't tell if she was panicking or relieved, but something cracked in me, not like glass, but like a dam. Years and years of trust, quiet devotion, birthday cakes, Christmas mornings, anniversaries, inside jokes, all of it swept out in a flood of betrayal. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I walked right past her into the kitchen and dropped the flash drive on the counter like a piece of used gum. She followed me, careful with her steps, like she was approaching a wild animal. "Wallace," she started. Don't," I said without looking back. "Not yet." I sat down at the table, opened my wallet, and pulled out a photo. One I kept for 30 years. Delilah at 3 years old, in pigtails, sitting on my shoulders, her hands pulling my ears like reins. I'd been rebuilding the porch stairs that day. She kept giggling, saying she wanted to see the world from Daddy's sky. That was my little girl. And Mason? That boy once broke his wrist jumping off the roof because he swore I could catch him no matter what. I didn't, but I stayed beside him all night in the hospital. I love them. Still do. That's the hardest part. "I need answers," I said, finally turning to her. "And I don't want the polite, polished version you've been rehearsing since 1991. She slowly sat across from me, took a deep breath, and said, "It was never supposed to go this far." She told me about Gavin Reese, a name I hadn't heard in decades. He was her ex-boyfriend in college, built like a linebacker, charming, reckless, the kind of man who gave you butterflies and ulcers in the same night. They broke up 2 years before she met me, or so I thought. Sharon admitted that Gavin never really left, that even while we were dating, he'd show up in moments of weakness, sometimes in person, sometimes in letters. When I asked if she loved him, she didn't answer. Instead, she stared down at her wedding ring. And that silence? That silence screamed yes. "Did he know?" I asked. She nodded once. "He knew they were his." She hesitated. "He suspected. I told him not to come near them, that you were their father in every way that mattered." My fist clenched, and I just walked through life, blindfolded. "No," she whispered. "You walked through life being the best man I've ever known. And I let you." I didn't cry. I didn't break. Not yet. I got up, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. I didn't know where I was going, but the truck knew. Somehow, it took me to the old hardware store, owned by my best friend Tom Briggs. We'd worked rail together back in the 80s, and he was the kind of guy who never judged, just handed you a beer and listened. He saw my face when I walked in and didn't say a word, just handed me the keys to the back room and nodded. I sat there for 3 hours, didn't drink, didn't sleep. I stared at the wall and tried to understand how a life built so solidly could suddenly feel like it was made of wet paper. When I got home, the house was quiet. Delilah and Mason weren't there, which meant she hadn't told them. Good, because I would, but not yet. The next morning, I opened the envelope again, looked at the DNA reports. There was no lab listed, no logo, just codes and results. Whoever sent it had redacted the headers, but left enough evidence to leave no doubt. But why? Who sent it? It wasn't Gavin. He died 12 years ago in a car crash. I remember reading the obituary. Sharon never said a word about it. So who? I went back to the flash drive. This time I dug deeper. Inside the main folder was another subfolder, password protected. I stared at the name. R_Delilah Miss_truth. I tried the obvious. Wallace. Sharon. Gavin. Nothing. Then I typed 35 years. The folder opened. Inside were screenshots of emails, PDFs of printed texts, bank statements, dates, photos from a hotel in Denver dated just 5 years ago, with Sharon and a man who looked suspiciously like an older Gavin. But Gavin was dead, right? Then I looked closer. The timestamp. The email attached to the hotel booking. Gregory Reese, Gavin's younger brother. The man I'd met once at a barbecue 20 years ago. He'd always been friendly, helpful, even offered to take family photos with a big Nikon camera. But in one photo, he wasn't holding a camera. He was holding Sharon's hand. And then it clicked. Gregory had taken over where Gavin left off. This wasn't a decades-old mistake. This was a pattern, a sick, secret second life. And I've been living beside it for 3.5 decades. I drove out to the edge of town where Gregory lived. He ran a roofing business and lived in a white ranch-style house with red shutters. I sat in the truck and waited. At 6:04 p.m., he walked out carrying a cooler, saw me, froze, then slowly walked up to the truck. I rolled the window down, didn't say a word, just handed him the photo of him and Sharon from the hotel lobby. His face drained of color. "I didn't mean for you to find out," he said. I looked him in the eye. "You gave me that envelope, didn't you?" He didn't deny it. "What?" He exhaled. "Because I'm sick. Stage 4. Got maybe 6 months left." And I couldn't die knowing the lie kept going. "You're not doing this for me," I said flatly. He shook his head. "No, I'm doing it for them." I drove home under a sky turning gold with sunset. When I opened the door, Mason and Delilah were both in the living room. Sharon sat stiffly in a chair, and Mason stood up, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "Dad, Mom says there's something you need to tell us." My name is Wallace Dean Rowley, and I'm 62 years old. For 35 years, I've been a husband to the same woman. For 33 of those years, I've been a father to a boy and a girl I raised with my hands, my time, and my soul. I was never rich. I worked as a diesel mechanic at a freight yard outside of Fort Collins, Colorado. Long hours, tough winters. My back's not what it used to be. My hands shake when I hold tools now. But I always came home to the same woman, Sharon, and our 2 kids, Mason and Delilah. That house, it was the heart of my life. We had our 35th wedding anniversary last month, July 19th. I remember it clearly because I rented the same small hall we used for our reception in 1989. The blue walls were peeling. The ceiling fans squeaked like hungry birds, but it was ours. We had family photos printed onto posters, a slideshow of old Polaroids, and one of those white sheet cakes with blue flowers and scripted icing that always tastes like toothpaste, but no one really complains. Sharon wore the same shade of blush she did on our wedding day. I kissed her cheek and said, "Still the prettiest girl I've ever seen." She smiled, but her eyes didn't crinkle like they used to. The party went on with laughter and chatter. I gave a short speech, thanked her for sticking beside me through layoffs, surgeries, raising kids, and keeping me grounded when life felt like too much. People clapped. She kissed me. We danced. And then, just as we were leaving the hall, an usher walked up to me. Young guy, didn't know his name. He had a small black gift box in one hand and a white envelope in the other. "This was left for you, sir," he said. No return name. Just said it was urgent. I opened the envelope in the car while Sharon chatted with Delilah in the back seat. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of thick paper. It had no greeting, no signature, just 3 words at the top in all capital letters. "You deserve to know." Beneath it were 2 official-looking DNA test documents. At first, I thought it was a joke, but the numbers were there. The names. Mine, Mason's, Delilah's, and next to both of their names. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. I stared at it so long my fingers began to cramp. I reread it 10 times, my stomach tightening with each pass. Then I slowly lifted the lid of the black gift box. Inside, a flash drive. No label, no instructions. Just a small silver drive sitting on black velvet like it was a wedding ring. I didn't tell Sharon. Not yet. I waited until she was asleep that night. Then I slipped out of bed and plugged the flash drive into my old laptop in the garage. It was password protected. Only it wasn't a password, I had to guess. Because the file inside was titled, "He's been in your home." The video inside started with grainy footage, black and white, clearly from an old home camera or a hidden cam. I saw my own living room, my couch, my rug, the big antique clock I'd refinished the year Mason was born. Then I saw him, a man, late 20s, dark hair, built like a football player, wearing a t-shirt I recognized because it was mine. He walked confidently through my house, stopped at the liquor cabinet I'd always kept locked, and used the spare key Sharon kept in her jewelry box to open it. He poured himself a drink, sat on my recliner, put his feet up. Then Sharon walked in a frame. She didn't look shocked. She smiled, and she kissed him. Not a kiss on the cheek, not a sisterly hug. She kissed him like I didn't exist. Like the last 35 years of marriage were a show, and I was the audience, not the co-star. The video ended with more documents, more DNA reports, emails between Sharon and the man, dated 30 years ago, photos from hotels, receipts from weekends. I thought she'd gone to visit her sister in Nebraska. I sat in the garage for 3 hours, sweating, breathing like I'd run 5 miles uphill. My heart wasn't just breaking, it was rotting from the inside. At 6:07 a.m., I heard footsteps. Sharon walked into the garage, still wearing her robe, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Honey," she said softly, "you didn't come back to bed. Are you okay?" I turned and looked at her, the same woman I protected, fed, trusted, given my life to. And I asked her one question. "Who is he?" She froze. Coffee spilled slightly from her mug. She tried to smile. "What do you mean?" But the lie was already unraveling in her eyes. I stood, took out the flash drive, held it up. "You kissed him in my chair, Sharon." She didn't speak. Not a word. She didn't deny it. Didn't cry. She just stared at me, then said 5 words that made my blood run cold. "You were never supposed to know." Mason looked at me like a man watching his world crack from the inside. Delilah stood behind him, her arms folded, but her eyes, those same brown eyes I used to rock to sleep, were wide with confusion. Fear, maybe even guilt. Sharon stayed seated, her hands folded tightly in her lap, lips pressed into a thin line like she was holding the words in with everything she had. "Dad," Mason said again. "What's going on?" I looked at Sharon. Her chin trembled, but she said nothing. I stepped forward. Every nerve in my body told me to run, to keep it quiet, to pretend a little longer, but the moment had come. They deserved the truth, even if it broke them, even if it broke me. I sat down and said it slowly. "There's something I need to tell you both, and it's not easy, but you deserve to hear it from me." Their expressions changed like clouds shifting over a calm sky. 35 years ago, I continued. "I married your mother because I loved her. I still believe she loved me. We had a home, a life, and then you two came along. Mason, Delilah, you were my world." I paused. Mason leaned forward. Delilah clutched her elbow like it was holding her up. I took a breath. "I just found out I'm not your biological father." Silence. Heavy, crushing, the kind that rings in your ears even when no one's speaking. Delilah blinked. Mason took a step back. "What?" he whispered. I pulled out the DNA documents and slid them across the table. Mason didn't touch them. Delilah stared at the page like it was written in another language. "I don't understand," she finally said. I looked at Sharon. Her eyes welled, and she whispered, "I'm sorry. Don't tell me that." I snapped. "Not now." Mason finally picked up the paper. He read it 3 times before letting it fall from his fingers. Then, slowly, he sat down and looked at me with eyes I'd never seen so hollow. "You're not my father?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him and shake him and say, "Yes, of course I am." But the truth was sitting on the table like a live grenade. "Not by blood," I said softly, "but every scraped knee, every science project, every football game. I was there. Always." He looked down. Delilah whispered, "Who is?" I didn't want to say his name, but it was time. His name was Gavin Reese. Delilah blinked. "Was?" "He died years ago," I said. "But his brother, Gregory, he knew, and he was the one who finally told me." Mason stood up. He paced like a storm cloud, trying to find where to pour its rain. "Why now?" he said. "Why did you wait until now?" "I didn't wait," I said. "I only found out 2 days ago." He turned to Sharon. "Is it true?" She nodded slowly, shame written across every inch of her face. It started before your father and I married," she said quietly. "I thought I could leave it behind. Then I got pregnant, and I told myself it didn't matter. That Wallace would be a better father than Gavin could ever be." "You lied to us," Delilah whispered. "You lied our whole lives." "I didn't want to hurt you." Delilah shook her head, tears brimming. "But you did." Mason sat again. He stared at me. "Did you always know something was off?" I nodded. I had doubts. Little things. You didn't look much like me. But I told myself love was enough. That it didn't matter. And does it? I stood up and walked toward him. "You're my son," I said firmly. "No test can change what I gave to raise you." He didn't say anything, but he didn't step back either. Delilah wiped her cheeks and said, "So what now? What are we supposed to do with this?" And I told him the truth. I don't know, because honestly, I didn't. That night, Sharon and I sat in separate rooms. We didn't speak. I stared at our wedding photo above the fireplace. Young Sharon, young me, a promise frozen in time, a lie buried beneath the vows. The next morning, I drove to the cemetery, to Gavin's grave. It was old, faded, barely legible. I brought a lawn chair and sat down beside it. Funny thing, I muttered, "You died, but you still managed to blow up my life." I looked at the stone and wondered if he ever regretted it, if he ever wanted to tell me. But dead men don't confess. Only the living carry the weight. That night, Gregory called me. I didn't want to answer, but I did. "You okay?" he asked. I didn't respond. "I know it doesn't change anything," he said, "but I want you to know I never approved of what Gavin did. And when Sharon came to me after his death, I told her to come clean. She said she would. She didn't. So why send the letter now?" "I told you," he said. "I'm dying. I needed to clear my conscience and drop a bomb on mine in the process." He was quiet and said, "I hope one day they realize who their real father is. And I don't mean biologically." The next morning, I found an envelope on the front porch. Inside was a photo of Mason sitting at a diner with a man I didn't recognize. And on the back, in scratchy handwriting, "Blood finds blood." I stared at it for a long time and realized the past wasn't done with us yet. The photo shook me more than I expected. I'd already taken a hit, swallowed the truth that my children weren't biologically mine. But this photo, this simple, grainy, black and white image, was something else. It was recent. Mason sat in a corner booth at Parker's Diner. I recognized the red vinyl seats and the checkered tile floors. Across from him sat a tall man, mid-50s, with slicked-back gray hair and a black coat. His hands rested on the table like they knew control. Confidence. I flipped the photo again. Blood finds blood. No name, no date, no return address. Just a photo and a warning, or maybe a prophecy. I sat back on the porch swing, the morning breeze playing with the edge of the envelope. My coffee turned cold in my hand. I couldn't stop staring at Mason's face in the picture. He wasn't smiling. He looked tense, focused, like someone hearing a story they weren't ready to believe. Was this man another Reese? Another ghost from Sharon's past? Had Mason gone to find his real father's family? And more importantly, did Mason already know the truth before I told him? I didn't confront him immediately. I needed more information. So I drove to Parker's Diner. It was around 11 a.m., a slow hour between breakfast and lunch. Brenda, the server who'd worked there since the Clinton administration, lit up when she saw me. "Wallace Rowley, haven't seen you in a while. Coffee." I nodded and sat at the counter. Brenda poured a cup and leaned in. "What brings you around this morning? You look like someone kicked your dog." I slid the photo across the counter, pointing to the man sitting across from Mason. "You recognize him?" Brenda squinted. Her eyes sharpened. "Yeah, he comes in now and then. Not from around here. Big tipper. Doesn't talk much. I think his name's Daniel or David. Something with AD. When was this taken?" "Oh, I'd say about 2 weeks ago. Came in with your boy. They talked for over an hour. Mason didn't touch his food. 2 weeks. That was before I found the DNA letter. So Mason did know. He'd already met the man before I said a word. I drove home in silence. Not the kind of silence that comforts, but the kind that roars inside your skull. Betrayal is heavy, but layered betrayal? That's poison. I parked in the driveway, walked inside, and found Mason in the garage, tuning up his old motorcycle. He looked up. "Hey, Dad, that word, it still hurt. Not because he said it, but because I wasn't sure if he meant it. You met someone 2 weeks ago," I said. His wrench froze mid-turn. "What?" I held out the photo. He stood, took it from my hand, looked at it, sighed. "You weren't supposed to see this. So you didn't know?" Before I said anything, he nodded. I stepped back. "Why didn't you tell me?" Mason rubbed the back of his neck, eyes filled with guilt. "Because I didn't want to hurt you more than you already were. I found out by accident. A guy reached out to me online, said he might be connected to my biological father, said I should hear his side, and he didn't say much, just that there were things I didn't know, that maybe Mom wasn't the villain I thought she was. That stopped me. What does that mean? He said Gavin wasn't the only one. that someone else orchestrated things. My blood chilled. Like who? Mason looked me dead in the eye. Like Gregory. That night, I went back to the flash drive. I clicked deeper into a folder called A_Reese Legacy. Videos, audio clips, a journal digitized, and emails. From Gregory to Sharon. From Gregory to a law firm in Denver. From Gregory to someone simply named DW. They detailed something horrific. Not just an affair. A plan. A calculated plan to replace me. To build a clean bloodline. To rewrite legacy. Gavin was just the start. Gregory continued it. And DW? Whoever he was, he funded it. And the worst part? Sharon didn't just let it happen. She signed her name to documents, to agreements, to silence. Delilah came home the next morning. She looked pale. "I need to talk to you," she said, pulling me aside. She had a printout in her hand. "I found this in Mom's closet. It was a will. Not mine, not Sharon's, but one written by Gavin Reese. In it, he named Delilah and Mason as beneficiaries. He also named Gregory as executor. And the date? 3 years ago. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding that will. Mason and Delilah stood in the doorway, watching me. Then I looked up and whispered. This wasn't betrayal. They leaned closer. This was a bloodless coup. For the first time in my life, I didn't recognize the faces around my dinner table. They looked like my children. They sounded like my children. But their names were on another man's will, wrapped in lies and quiet betrayals. I felt like a man watching his house burn down, but the fire had started in the foundation, and I hadn't seen the smoke until it was too late. Mason stood stiff in the doorway, arms crossed. Delilah paced. Sharon hadn't come out of the bedroom since the will was discovered. I didn't call for her either. Why would he write a will? I asked. He was dead and gone for years. Delilah lowered her voice. Gregory had it notarized. The documents are real. Mason and I verified them. You went behind my back. We needed answers, Mason replied. You weren't talking to us anymore. I clenched my jaw. My knuckles whitened around the coffee mug in my hand. That man is not your father. He never was. He didn't raise you. He didn't earn it. Mason's eyes softened for a split second, but only for a second. I know who raised me, he said, and I love you for it. But I need to know why my life was built on lies. Delilah dropped into a chair. Her voice cracked. We deserve to know everything, Dad. I stood up, walked to the filing cabinet in the study, pulled out the folder I'd avoided since the funeral. My father's journal. A man who spent 40 years working the tracks. A man who believed that truth, even if painful, was the foundation of everything worth building. I dropped it on the table. You want truth? Read that. Then we'll talk. They read in silence. It wasn't about Gavin. It wasn't about Sharon. It was about me. My fears. My doubts. My battles. How I stayed up at night, wondering if I was enough. How I knew, deep in my soul, that something was off. But I kept building. Because I believed love made a man a father. Not DNA. When they finished, Mason looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time in years. You never told us you almost left. I didn't, because I didn't want you to grow up feeling unwanted, even if I wasn't sure where I belonged. Delilah took my hand. You always belonged with us. The next day, a letter came. From Gregory. He was dead. The envelope was dated 3 days before. Inside was a video drive and one line. Watch this with your children. The truth matters now. We gathered that night. Me, Mason, Delilah. Sharon stayed in the hallway, listening but not watching. The video played. Gregory sat in a hospital bed, his face gaunt, tubes running from his arms. If you're watching this, I'm already gone, and I need to confess. He went on to explain the whole plan. How Gavin had fathered more than just Mason and Delilah. How Gregory had tried to preserve the Reese line after Gavin's death. How he manipulated Sharon. How he doctored DNA records and pushed the will through his legal contacts. But the final blow? Delilah was never Gavin's daughter. She was Wallace's. We all froze. Delilah gasped. Gregory continued, his voice weaker now. Sharon never knew. She believed Gavin was the father. But the timing, it was wrong. I ran my own tests. Delilah is Wallace's. She always was. Delilah covered her mouth, tears falling. I couldn't move. I'm sorry, Gregory said. For everything. For stealing your peace. For twisting the truth. The screen went black. Mason stood up first. He left the room without a word. Delilah hugged me. Tight. Unshakable. I always hoped, she whispered. I just didn't know how to believe it. The next morning, Sharon sat at the kitchen table. Her eyes red, her hands shaking. There's something I still haven't told you, she said. I didn't answer. She looked up. You were supposed to get another letter. One I burnt. I stared at her. What did it say? She looked me dead in the eye. That Mason might not be Gavin's either. My chest tightened. Again, Mason, not Gavin's? That made no sense. For weeks, the idea of him being someone else's child had gutted me. But now, the one constant in all this deception was being questioned. And it wasn't coming from Gregory. It was coming from Sharon, my wife. The woman who had spent her entire life hiding behind masks. You burned it. I asked slowly. Sharon looked down at her trembling hands. It came a few days before your anniversary. Anonymous envelope. Like the first one. No return address. But the handwriting was the same. It said Mason was likely someone else's. Not Gavin's. Not yours. Then who? She didn't answer. Sharon. Who? Her voice cracked like glass. I don't know. I stood up, knocking the chair back. My blood roared in my ears. You don't get to say that. Not anymore. Not after 35 years. You have to know. Sharon clutched the edge of the table. Eyes flooded. There was a time before you. Before Gavin. One night. I don't even know his last name. We weren't together long. I thought I was careful. But the timing. Mason might not be either of yours. I sank into the couch. The air in the room thinned. All the timelines I'd memorized, birthdays, anniversaries, hospital visits, home videos, crumbled like ash. Mason returned that evening. I couldn't look him in the eye. Delilah tried to fill the air with conversation, but the silence devoured her words. When Sharon finally confessed to Mason what she had told me, he didn't speak. He left the house. For 2 days. No call. No message. Delilah and I waited. Sharon stayed, locked in the bedroom. I found myself praying, not out of habit, but desperation. Not for Mason to come back, but for truth. Something real. Something I could hold on to. When he returned, he was changed. His hair looked disheveled, and his eyes were swollen, as if he hadn't slept. He stood at the doorway and asked me calmly, would you love me any less if I wasn't yours or Gavin's? I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just opened my arms. He walked into them. We talked through the night. He told me he visited a lab, started his own testing, asked for a full breakdown. It would take weeks, but he needed it. Not because he doubted my love, but because he needed to anchor himself. When everything is a lie, he said, you need to find one thing that's true. I understood, because I was doing the same. The next morning, Delilah came into the kitchen with a shoebox. Old, dusty. Inside were photos, letters, journals Sharon had hidden years ago. Some were addressed to Gavin, others to Gregory. And then, buried beneath them all, was a small, crumpled receipt. A DNA test order, never sent, with Mason's name. Sharon had doubted long ago, and kept it from all of us. I sat Sharon down. You lied to protect yourself, not us. She nodded, tears on her cheeks. I thought it would all go away. But lies don't vanish. They rot. And now, we're the ones dealing with the stench. That night, I packed a bag. Delilah helped me. Mason watched silently. I walked past Sharon without a word. As I reached the front door, she asked, where will you go? I looked back only once. Somewhere truth still matters. I drove until the highway gave way to open fields. To a quiet cottage once owned by my uncle, long empty, long forgotten. Inside, I dusted off the old kitchen table and set down a new journal. And I began to write. To my children, for when I'm gone, so you'll know what real love looked like. Days passed. Silence became my companion. Not the empty kind, the healing kind. I woke to birds instead of voices. Cooked my own meals. Sat by the creek and remembered who I was before life demanded I forget. The journal filled quickly. Memories poured from me like floodwaters. The good, the bad, the hidden. I wrote everything. How I first met Sharon at the church potluck. The shy smile she wore. The way she twirled her hair when nervous. Our first dance in the living room. The arguments over bills. The miscarriage we never told anyone about. And I wrote about Mason. How he wouldn't sleep unless I sang Johnny Cash. How he called me coach before he learned to say dad. The night I stayed up sewing his Halloween costume. Blood or not, he was mine. And Delilah? My soul split open the day she was born. She held my finger in her sleep the first night in the hospital. I never wanted to let go. One morning, a knock came at the door. I opened it, and there she was. Delilah, tears already on her cheeks. I didn't know where else to go, she whispered. I held her, tight, without questions. She stayed for 3 days. We didn't talk about Sharon, or the lies. We just lived, cooked pancakes, went fishing, walked trails. But the silence couldn't hold forever. On the 4th day, she sat beside me on the porch. Mason called. The results came in. My heart slowed. He wants you to be there when he opens them. I didn't answer immediately. Do you want to know? I asked. She wiped a tear. Not really, but I want Mason to know he's not alone. That night, I packed my bag again. Back home, the air felt heavier. Sharon didn't come out when we arrived. Mason sat at the kitchen table, an envelope between his hands. He looked older, worn, but calm. I haven't opened it, he said. I wanted you here. He tore the seal, pulled out the sheet. Read in silence. Delilah and I waited. He looked up, eyes unreadable. It says I'm not Gavin's. We're yours. He paused, but I still don't care. And then he passed the paper to me. At the bottom, typed in bold, no genetic relationship found. Sharon stepped into the room. I looked at her, her face pale, her eyes dry. Hollow, is it true? I asked. She nodded once. It was a mistake. A one-night stand before we even started dating seriously. I thought he was just a rebound. I never dreamed. She couldn't finish. Mason stood. I'm going for a walk. Delilah followed him, leaving me alone. With Sharon, she whispered, I know there's no excuse, but I never loved anyone like I loved you. Not even Gavin. You were the one who stayed. I didn't reply, because words didn't matter anymore. Only actions, and mine were already in motion. That evening, Mason handed me a letter. For you, he said. Found it in Gregory's storage box. He meant it for you. I opened it. Inside were 4 words scrawled in ink. Blood never raised you. And underneath, a key to a safe deposit box, one I never knew existed. The key in my hand was small, ordinary, dull silver. But it burned in my palm like it carried every secret I had never been told. The words in Gregory's note, blood never raised you, still rang in my ears as I sat there in the silence of that fading afternoon. Delilah stood nearby, eyes flicking between me and the envelope as if something else might still fall out. Mason leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded, his face blank but his eyes stormy. Do you know what it's for? Mason asked. I nodded slowly. It's a deposit box key. First National Bank, downtown branch. Gregory had worked there for decades. He knew the vaults like the back of his hand. Of course he'd stashed something away. Gregory never let anything lie in the open, not when it mattered. We left that evening. I didn't want to wait till morning. I couldn't. Delilah rode in the back, quiet, hugging herself. Mason drove. I stared at the lights as they passed. Street lights, headlights, the blinking neon of diners I used to take my kids to. How many moments in my life had passed by while people I trusted spun lies around me? Inside the bank, the air was too clean, sanitized, like the truth couldn't breathe there. The manager brought us to a private viewing room with beige walls and a small steel table bolted to the floor. She opened the safety deposit box, then left us alone. The box was heavier than I expected. Mason set it on the table. I lifted the lid. Inside, a manila envelope thick with papers. A sealed plastic bag filled with neatly stacked $100 bills. A small black voice recorder. And a journal. Leather-bound. Burgundy. The corners worn. I pulled out the envelope first. Inside were notarized letters, copies of court documents, medical records, and DNA results. Some had my name. Some had Sharon's. And others had Gavin's, Mason's, even Gregory's. Mason pulled out one page and read it aloud. To whom it may concern, this document certifies that as of July 17th, 1995, a paternity test performed by Ridgeview Diagnostics indicates a 0% chance that Wallace Eugene Carter is the biological father of Mason Gregory Carter. My breath stopped. The date, it was a full year after Mason was born. That meant someone had tested this long ago. Without me. Delilah gasped. "Who did this?" she whispered. There was a sticky note attached to the corner. Gregory's handwriting. Had to be sure. "You deserve to know, but I couldn't be the one to tell you." I shook my head. He didn't test his own son. He tested mine. The betrayal sank deeper. Mason was silent, but I saw his jaw clench tight. He turned away. I opened the journal. Gregory's writing was precise, neat. His tone, clinical. Page after page, detailed years of manipulation. Fertility windows. Tracking Sharon's hormone cycles. Times he scheduled meetings with her when Gavin was away. Ways he managed to gain her trust, then control her fears. Gregory had orchestrated everything, from sabotaging my early relationship with Sharon to making sure Gavin always looked like the better man. He never wanted Sharon for love. He wanted her for legacy. He wrote, "I didn't need to be their father to shape their lives." That was always the mistake people made about bloodlines. The real influence comes from control. I turned to a page marked with a ribbon. It read, "Gavin never knew. He was my shield, my tool. But Wallace, he was the one I envied. He had Sharon's trust, the children's admiration. I could never earn it, so I decided to mold it." My hand shook. This wasn't just betrayal. It was obsession. Mason pulled the recorder from the box. "Should we play it?" I nodded. He pressed play. Gregory's voice came through, flat and hollow, like a ghost reading his own eulogy. "If you're hearing this, then I'm dead. And no, I don't ask for forgiveness. I never believed in redemption, only resolution. Wallace, if you're here, you were always the variable I couldn't predict. You stayed kind, even when you had every reason not to. You should have broken years ago, but you didn't. That's why I respected you and hated you." The message continued. Descriptions of payoffs. A confession to forging Gavin's will. Tampering with hospital records. Even bribing a lab technician to alter DNA results. He ended the tape with these words. "I leave you the truth. Do what you will. But know this. Mason is more your son than he ever could have been mine or Gavin's. Not by birth, but by choice." The recorder clicked off. We drove home in silence. The next morning, Mason called a family meeting. Sharon came downstairs slowly, like each step cost her years. Delilah stood beside me, arms crossed, unblinking. Mason laid out the documents. The journal, the tape. He didn't raise his voice. "Tell me why," he said to Sharon. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then said, "Because I was afraid." Gregory promised stability. He said Gavin wasn't coming back. He said Wallace couldn't love me if he knew the truth. And part of me believed him. "Did you ever love me?" Mason asked. She swallowed. "I love what you made me feel. I just didn't know how to love myself." Mason nodded slowly, then stood and walked out. Delilah followed. I stayed, stared at Sharon. "I don't hate you," I said quietly, "but I can't stay married to you." She didn't argue. She just cried. Weeks passed. Mason moved into his own place. Delilah helped me pack. The house, once a home, now echoed with too many ghosts. Laughter that no longer felt sweet. Footsteps that reminded me of betrayals. I moved to a cabin near Bear Creek, the one I'd inherited from my uncle. Far from town, quiet. Each morning, I woke before the sun and wrote. Not for revenge, not even for justice. Just to remember. Delilah came by often, brought groceries, brought Julian, her son, my grandson. Mason visited less. But when he did, we talked about books, about old cars, about things fathers and sons should talk about. Blood had nothing to do with it. One day, Delilah found a package at my door. No return address. Inside was a flash drive and a note. "You missed something." We plugged it into my laptop. A video file. Static at first. Then a man's face. Beard. Gaunt cheeks. Eyes like a storm I thought I'd never see again. Gavin. He was alive. Or at least had been. The timestamp was recent. His voice was rough. "If you're watching this, then you found Gregory's stash. You know he lied. You know Sharon lied. You probably know more than I do now. But here's the thing. I didn't die when they said I did. Gregory told me I had terminal cancer, told me to sign everything over, said it would be easier for Sharon, easier for Mason. I was stupid. I believed him. The video shook, like Gavin had dropped the camera and picked it back up. Turns out I wasn't sick. He was drugging me. Slow doses. Just enough to fool the doctors. When I found out, I disappeared. Didn't want to drag Sharon down. Didn't think I was worth saving. But then I saw what Wallace did for Mason. For Delilah. I saw the life I threw away. His voice broke. Wallace, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. For everything. The screen went black. Mason drove up that night. We watched the video again together. He's still alive, Mason whispered. Maybe, I said. We have to find out. Delilah nodded. And in that moment, we made a choice. We weren't going to be victims of secrets anymore. We were going to find the truth, even if it meant digging up the past one last time. That night, I received a second email. Different sender. Subject, Gavin's not the only one watching. No body text. Just a photo. A man standing across the street from my cabin. Taken at 2:17 a.m. That same night. The wind that night howled like a wounded beast. I stood at the window, the glow of the porch light bleeding into the darkness beyond, illuminating nothing but a few falling leaves and the distant silhouette of pine trees. The photo from the anonymous email was still open on my laptop screen. The timestamp burned into my mind, 2:17 a.m. The figure in the image was blurry, but the posture was familiar. It wasn't Gavin. It wasn't Gregory. It wasn't anyone I could name, but he knew where I lived. Mason arrived at sunrise, his truck kicking up gravel as he pulled in fast. Delilah and Julian followed an hour later. We sat around the table, the photo displayed on the television, blown up, enhanced. Julian played on the floor with his trucks, oblivious to the rising tension. I checked the property, Mason said. No tracks. Whoever it was, he knew not to get too close, where he wanted to be seen. Message, Delilah asked. Threat, I said. Delilah stared at the image. Then we need to know who he is. We spent the next week in a haze of questions and long drives. Delilah reached out to a friend of hers, Aaron Langley, who worked in private security. Mason scanned forums and public surveillance feeds. I dove back into Gregory's journal, looking for anything that might hint at another player in this twisted game. Gregory had mentioned someone once, a man he called the broker. No name, no face, just a role. He deals in secrets, Gregory had written. Doesn't ask questions. He's the last call when you've run out of roads. Aaron tracked an encrypted financial trail from Gregory's account to an LLC in Nevada. That LLC owned a cabin outside Helena, Montana. Aaron said the place was registered to a man named Rowan Pike. We had never heard of him, but Rowan had a criminal record so scrubbed it smelled of corruption. We packed up. I didn't tell Delilah to stay behind. I knew better. The cabin in Montana looked like something from a hunter's catalog. Secluded, cameras hidden in trees, a driveway so long it curved through 3 clearings. We waited until dusk. Then Mason and I approached. Delilah stayed behind with Julian in the car, armed with a burner phone and a quick escape plan. The door opened before we knocked. Rowan was tall, lean, maybe 60. Hair gray and long, tied back. His eyes were pale, unreadable. You're late, he said. He let us in. Inside was all wood and leather, with shelves lined with old radios, maps, and stacks of newspapers. He sat. I assume you came about Gavin, he said. We didn't answer. He chuckled. You Carter boys never were subtle. Mason stiffened. You know us. Rowan reached behind him and pulled out a photo. It was old. A picture of me, Sharon, Gavin, and Mason. Taken at a summer barbecue maybe 2 decades ago. I was the one who warned Gavin, Rowan said. My heart skipped. I worked for Gregory. For a while. Back when he was playing God with everyone's lives. I thought he was just a banker with ambition. Then he asked me to monitor Gavin, track his health, his pills, his movements. That's when I knew something was off. You saved him, I said. He shook his head. I delayed the inevitable. Gavin left, but not just because of Gregory. He found out something bigger. What? Mason asked. Rowan stood, pulled a file from a locked drawer. He laid it on the table. Inside were photos, handwritten letters, and one grainy video still. Gregory wasn't just manipulating your family. He was protecting a secret that went back years. He laundered money, funded illegal trials, drug tests, gene therapy studies. One of the companies involved? Sharon was a silent investor. Delilah gasped. Sharon? Rowan nodded. She didn't know the full extent, but she knew enough. Gregory promised her security, power, a future beyond Wallace. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It was never about love. It was about control, and maybe survival. We returned home 2 days later, minds spinning with truth and theory. I confronted Sharon again. She sat across from me at the cabin. No tears left. I did what I had to, she said. Gregory said Gavin was dying, that you'd never forgive me for Mason. He said we could secure a future if I stayed quiet. You chose a legacy over a family, I said. She looked away. You were always too good, Wallace. Too decent. It made me feel smaller. She left that night. No suitcase. No goodbyes. Just gone. Weeks passed. We didn't hear from Gavin. Rowan's last words haunted me. If Gavin surfaces, it won't be safe. Not for him. Not for you. So we waited. Watched. And one morning it happened. Delilah found a burner phone in her mailbox. It rang. Once. Then buzzed with a text. Red Barn. 2 miles past Carter's Ridge. Come alone. We debated for hours. Finally, I went. The Red Barn was old, half collapsed. My boots crunched frost as I walked across the field. The door creaked. Inside, Gavin sat on a hay bale. Leaner, older, but alive. He looked up. Hey, Walt. My throat closed. I thought you were dead. He nodded. I was. Almost. Then I remembered who I was. Who you were. We sat in silence for minutes. Then he told me everything. Gregory's final scheme. A plan to funnel money into a black fund meant to pay off government officials. Cover up trials. Rewrite records. Gavin found out too much. Gregory silenced him with drugs and lies. But someone helped me, Gavin said. A man in a mask. Called himself Rowan. Said you deserve better. I smiled. He was right. Gavin reached into his coat. Pulled out a box. Inside were files. Names. Bank accounts. People Gregory paid off. Proof, he said. Enough to bring the whole system down. We returned home under darkness. The kids waited. Mason hugged Gavin like he hadn't seen him in decades. Delilah wept. We had the files. Made plans. Tomorrow, we would contact the authorities. Tonight, we would be family. But at 2:17 a.m., another email arrived. No text, just a photo. Our cabin, lit by moonlight. A silhouette at the edge of the trees. Closer this time, and below the image, for words. You're not done yet. The morning after the second photo arrived, the world around us didn't look different, but it felt different. The trees still swayed gently in the wind. The sun rose in its usual golden spill across the hills. But our peace had been shattered. Again, we sat at the kitchen table. Gavin, Mason, Delilah, Julian playing in the corner. Each of us staring at the printed image that lay on the wood like a silent thread. A silhouette closer to the cabin than before. A message typed beneath it. You're not done yet. Gavin ran his hand through his hair. They're watching. Not just me. All of us. Mason stood, pacing. Then we strike first. We take everything we have and expose them. The money, the names, the trials. All of it. Delilah looked at me. Her eyes asked the question no one else dared voice. Can we survive this? I nodded slowly. We're going to finish it. On our terms. We spent the next week preparing. Gavin backed up every file onto multiple drives. We created digital folders, naming them carefully, encrypting the contents. Aaron Langley, the security expert, connected us with a federal prosecutor who had already been sniffing around the pharmaceutical companies Gregory had worked with. She promised protection, but she also warned us. Once this goes public, there's no going back. You'll be targets. We understood. We moved forward anyway. Delilah and Mason recorded video statements. Not rehearsed speeches, just honest, tearful truths. About manipulation. About lies. About who Gregory really was. I recorded mine last. I didn't cry. I spoke about family. About legacy. About how blood is nothing without loyalty. About how I spent 35 years building a home for people who never saw me. I ended with one line, "But I see me now, and I'm not going to be silent." We uploaded everything onto a secure cloud server. Then Gavin made the call. The meeting with the prosecutor was scheduled at a federal building 2 hours away. Plainclothes agents were dispatched to escort us. But before we could leave, a black SUV pulled up at the foot of the driveway. We watched from the window. 2 men got out. They weren't government. We knew that immediately. They were dressed too clean, moved too casual, like they had nothing to fear. Gavin grabbed a bag. Mason grabbed the old hunting rifle we kept mounted above the fireplace. I opened the door. "Can I help you?" I asked. The taller of the 2 men smiled. "We're here to collect something Gregory left behind. Something that doesn't belong to you." "Funny," I said. "I was just about to say the same to you." They didn't move. Delilah came to the doorway. She didn't say a word. Behind her, Julian peeked around her leg. Something shifted in the taller man's face. Recognition, a twitch of guilt, or something worse. "I suggest you leave," I said, "before things get noisier than you want." He smiled again, this time colder. "You think this is over, old man? You think Gavin coming back changes the board? It doesn't. You're pawns. You always were." I took a step forward. "No, I was a pawn, but you made the mistake every tyrant makes. You underestimated what a pawn can do when it stops playing the game." They left without another word. The agents arrived 20 minutes later. We told them everything. We drove in a convoy. I watched the cabin shrink in the rearview mirror, unsure if I'd ever see it again. Inside the federal building, we handed everything over. The files, the journal, the video confessions, the recordings. What followed were weeks of silence, then arrests, news stories, headlines that screamed betrayal, banking executive linked to genetic testing scandal, secret trials exposed, deceit in the Carter family. Gregory's empire crumbled. Accounts were frozen. Executives resigned. Sharon's name appeared in the footnotes, but she denied involvement. She vanished not long after. A reporter tracked her to Belize. We never heard from her again. Gavin stayed. He bought a small property near mine, started a garden, rebuilt what he'd thrown away. One afternoon, we sat on the porch. Julian played in grass. Delilah painted on a canvas nearby. Mason grilled steaks. Gavin turned to me. "You ever think about how none of this would have happened if we'd just told the truth back then?" I nodded. "And how none of this healing would have happened if we hadn't fought for it now." He looked at me, eyes soft. "Thank you for raising Mason, for not giving up." I smiled. "Thank you for coming back." We clinked glasses. A month later, a package arrived in the mail. No name. Inside, a single chess piece. A white pawn and a note. "Pawns become queens when they reach the end." I laughed, because they were right. Epilogue. Delilah started a foundation, the Carter Trust for Victims of Medical Fraud. Mason published a memoir. It hit the bestseller list in a week. He titled it, Raised by Truth. Gavin started a small clinic. Free services, no red tape. As for me, I started building again. Not with bricks, not with promises. With time, with love, with the truth. Because in the end, family isn't who shares your blood. It's who stands with you when the world falls apart and helps you rebuild it, brick by honest brick.